Imagine waking up nearly 2 million years ago. You open your eyes on cold, hard ground. There is no bed beside you. There is no clean water waiting for you. There is no food in a kitchen. There is no medicine if you become sick. And there is no hospital if you break a bone. You look outside and see a world where almost everything is trying to survive. Somewhere nearby a predator may be searching for its next meal. The last food you found may already be gone. The water source you remember may have dried up. And the smallest injury could become a serious threat. Now imagine that this is your normal life. You are not Homo sapiens. You are Homo Habilis. You are living in East Africa roughly 1.8 million years ago. Your body is not powerful. Your brain is much smaller than the modern human brain. You have no metal tools, no machines, no antibiotics, no shelter built with modern materials, and yet your descendants will eventually spread across the planet. So how did you survive? How did one of the earliest members of our genus live in a world where humans were physically vulnerable and almost every useful resource had to be found with your own hands? The answer begins with something that looks almost worthless: a stone. In 1964, Louis Leakey, Philip Tobias and John Napier described Homo habilis from fossils discovered at Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. The fossils were roughly 1.8 million years old, but the technology associated with early Homo was even older. Oldowan stone tools from East Africa date back to around 2.6 million years ago. These tools were extremely simple. A stone was struck against another stone. A sharp edge appeared. That edge could cut, it could scrape, it could break through tough material, and it could help you reach food that your teeth alone could not easily access. Imagine finding a large animal carcass. You are hungry, you need energy, but the valuable parts are protected by thick hide and muscle. You pick up a sharp stone. You begin cutting. For the first time, your body is not your only weapon. The environment itself is becoming a tool. At Olduvai Gorge, archaeologists have found stone tools together with animal remains showing evidence of processing. Bones were broken, tissues were cut, nutrient-rich marrow could be exposed. A simple stone could turn a dead animal into a source of calories, but there was a problem. You were not the only creature interested in that carcass. Hyenas lived in these ancient landscapes. Large predators were also present. They were faster than you. They were stronger than you, and many of them could crush bones with their jaws. You could not simply fight them. Your survival depended on something else: timing, awareness, memory, and cooperation. You had to know when to approach. You had to know when to leave. You had to remember where food could be found. You had to recognize places where water was available. And you had to learn which parts of the landscape were dangerous. This is where Homo habilis becomes much more interesting. Because survival was beginning to depend on information. Your body gave you hands, but experience taught those hands what to do. You could learn that one type of stone breaks differently from another. You could learn that a sharp edge is useful for cutting. You could learn where animals moved. You could learn where water remained during dry periods. And you could remember what happened the last time you entered a dangerous area. Your brain was still small compared with ours. Some Homo habilis fossils have estimated cranial capacities around 600 to 700 cubic centimeters. The average modern human brain is around 1300 cubic centimeters. Yet a smaller brain was already capable of supporting increasingly complex behavior. You were not building cities. You were not writing books. You were not creating machines. But you were beginning to change your chances of survival through learned behavior. And that mattered because food was never guaranteed. Some days you might find an animal carcass. Other days you might find very little. You could use plants, seeds, roots, and other resources available in the environment. The exact diet of Homo habilis remains difficult to reconstruct, but the important point is that early humans could exploit more than one type of food. That flexibility was critical. If one resource disappeared, you needed another. If animals moved away, you needed to search. If the environment became drier, you needed to move toward water. If a familiar area became dangerous, you needed another route. You were not simply surviving in one fixed environment. You were constantly responding to change. Around 1.8 million years ago, East Africa contained a changing mixture of lakes, grasslands, woodland, and more open landscapes. Olduvai Gorge preserves geological evidence of ancient environmental changes. The world around Homo habilis was not stable. Water levels changed, vegetation changed, animals moved, and the availability of food changed with them. So movement became part of survival. You had to remember places, you had to follow resources, you had to explore. And eventually early Homo began appearing far beyond East Africa. At Dmanisi in present-day Georgia, archaeologists discovered early Homo fossils dating to around 1.8 million years ago. This is one of the earliest major pieces of evidence for Homo living outside Africa. Think about what that means. These early humans did not have modern maps. They did not have vehicles. They did not have GPS. They did not have stored food packed into containers. They moved into unfamiliar landscapes using their bodies, their memories, and their accumulated knowledge. And they survived. But survival was not always about finding food. Sometimes the biggest threat was what happened to your own body. A deep cut could become dangerous. A serious injury could make movement difficult. A broken bone could prevent you from reaching food or water. Today a serious injury can send you to an emergency room. Nearly 2 million years ago there was no emergency room waiting for you. There was only your environment, and the people around you. Later prehistoric evidence gives us powerful clues about the importance of social survival. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, a Neanderthal known as Shanidar 1 survived multiple serious injuries around 45,000 years ago. Shanidar 1 was not Homo Habilis. The individual lived much later. But the fossil shows that prehistoric humans could survive serious physical problems within a social group. Someone could remain close to an injured person. Food could be shared. Protection could be provided. And knowledge could move between individuals. For Homo Habilis, we cannot directly observe these behaviors, but the archaeological evidence shows something equally important. Stone technology continued across generations. That means knowledge was not disappearing with each individual. Something was being learned, repeated, and passed forward. This may have been one of the greatest advantages early humans possessed. You did not need to become stronger than every predator. You needed to become better at avoiding them. You did not need to grow larger teeth. You needed tools that could do what your teeth could not. You did not need to control every part of the environment. You needed to understand enough of it to survive. That is what makes Homo Habilis so important. The transformation was not sudden. There was no single moment when the first human suddenly became intelligent. There was no morning when Homo Habilis woke up and became modern. The change happened through countless small advantages. One useful stone, one remembered water source, one successful food processing technique, one lesson learned from an older individual, one dangerous place remembered and avoided, one new landscape explored, and then another. For thousands of generations these small advantages accumulated. The stone became a tool. The tool became a technique. The technique became knowledge. The knowledge could become part of a group, and the group could carry it into the future. Homo Habilis was not powerful because nature had become easier. Nature was still dangerous. Hunger was still real. Predators were still present. Injuries were still frightening. Weather could still change. Food could still disappear. But something fundamental had changed. You were no longer relying only on what your body could do. You were beginning to rely on what your mind could discover, what your hands could create, and what your group could remember. When you look at an Oldowan stone tool today it may appear almost meaningless, just a broken piece of rock. But around 2.6 million years ago a sharp stone represented something much bigger. It represented the beginning of a different relationship between humans and the world around them. The environment was no longer only something you had to endure. It was something you could manipulate, and that is how Homo Habilis survived. Not by becoming the strongest animal in Africa, not by escaping danger forever, but by learning how to turn weakness into an advantage. Because long before you had cities, before you had medicine, before you had machines, before you had the modern world, there was a human ancestor standing on ancient ground with almost nothing, and somehow that was enough to begin the journey toward you.